Speaker, but I thought we'd kill two birds with one stone and have Greg Hayes be the motivational speaker today. Good morning, Greg. Take it away, sir.
Oh man, the pressure is on right now. All right. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right. Very good. Well, welcome. Good morning, everyone. I brought you all breakfast burritos. They're underneath your chair. So let's go ahead and go on. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about where we ended the year. Maybe. There we go. I will caveat this a lot. It is very, very, very early in the process. Numbers are changing and changing a lot. And so I'm going through and giving you a feel for what it looks like, what it looked like mid-January. The numbers don't settle down until around March. And so we're pretty darned early on, but I'll give you a feel for how things are. The summary of what I'm going to tell you about 2024 general fund on the operating side, we were pretty darn close to budget. Some ups, some downs. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about those places, some kind of scary numbers toward the end of the year. Operating expenditures were very close to budget. Capital is going to be a problem. Capital revenue, especially in the last quarter of 2024, fell off pretty drastically. Our transfer is going to be lower than we projected, and we'll have to worry about that into the future as well. 2026, we did not make up additional funds, so 2026, which we talked about not being balanced, is still not balanced. We're going to discuss some implications. I'm going to get your thoughts on some questions as we're going through what appears to be a cut exercise for 2026, which is kind of what we were expecting to see. And then in other funds, I've got better news in other funds, so maybe we'll just focus on those. All right, so 2024 operating general fund year end, operating as a net of about $2.1 million in additional reserve funds. So it's on the positive side at end of day. 2.6 million more in operating revenue. That's about 0.6%. So in reality of a $500 million general fund, to be within a couple $1 million is very close. It's very close. A couple pieces of news. Sales tax actually ended up 2.1 million under the projection. For those of you that are on management and finance committee, we've been kind of talking about that recently, especially in the last quarter. It was falling under the projection. We guessed 4.5%. It came in at 3.7. Still positive, still a positive year, but not quite as much. Auto use tax was 1.9 million under the projection. We thought it was going to be fairly flat. Had some harder times. It came in down about 6.4%. Good news. The audit crew continues to overperform. Audit gave us about $3.4 million more, and then interest, miscellaneous, and other just smaller revenues added another 3.2. So we ended up about 2.6 to the good. So that's good. That's good. The sales tax worries me. The auto use tax worries me. We'll have to figure out once we get the leads projection what that means for the future in those terms. On the expenditure side, we ended the year slightly under projection, within a $500,000 of our projection on the operating side, where there's going to be some reappropriating of budget. There was some budget that just didn't get spent in time in 2024, so there's going to be a spring supplemental to appropriate some of that. I'm guessing about $1 million. That number will change as people start figuring out what their year end is and what they need to do with it. The capital revenue I talked about, especially building material use tax, significantly lower, almost all in the last quarter. So it was pretty interesting how that dropped off. Actually, it ends up to be valuations. So we had some sales, we had some buildings. The valuations were about 30% off of last year. So a little problem going on there. Our sales tax performance, we continued to have that little dance where it was down, up, down, up, down, up, having to do with the fact that we had some quarterly filers. When you do sales tax, when you're paying your sales tax, you could be a monthly filer, you could be a quarterly filer. If you're a small mom and pop, maybe you just do it once at year end. They came through and cleaned that up. They had some quarterly filers that should have been monthly filers, turned them into monthly filers, and that's why you see this during the quarters when they typically would pay. They paid 1/12 as opposed to 1/4, and then the other months were higher, and then down in and then the months were higher. What you'll notice toward the last quarter that here in the beginning, we were seeing 8s, 9s, 10s, 14s, and in the downsides, it was somewhere between 3 and 5. Toward the end of the year, your highs were getting lower and your lows were getting worse. All right, so that's why our sales tax performance, through August, I thought we were geniuses because we guessed 4.5 and it was exactly 4.5. And it just kind of dropped off after that. A little piece of good news that I will give you, December, at 6.3% was actually on our projection. And we weren't actually expecting that after a couple months of missing the projection. The one thing about December of 2024, you're comparing it to December of 2023. And December of 2023, which is based on November sales, 2023 was the majority, the most amount of time you could have had after Thanksgiving to have Black Friday and sales. 2024 was the least amount of time to have Black Friday. So to beat December is actually a little piece of good news.
That means we had in 2023, I think we had 6 or 7 days of Christmas shopping, if you would, in 2023. And in 2024, I think we had 3 days. So
Yep.
just that's what that means. So just the number of days of the Christmas holiday shopping season. We had many more days, the most you can have in 2023, the least in 2024. One of the other things we will report back to you on, and it really will kind of set the tone for 2025, is obviously our January collections is the remainder of the holiday shopping season, and that is our single largest month. So we're all anxiously awaiting that. Retailers had until yesterday to submit those, and so it'll take us probably another couple of weeks to sort through all those returns and kind of get an idea of how the holiday season actually went for us.
Yep. Francois, you have a question?
Yes. Do you track the sales tax of the online sales tax versus, in store?
In a way, we do track, for example, places that are only online. So obviously they're online sales, but a Walmart that could have an online or another component, when they process their tax return, they don't say this much online, this much in store. They just give us money, so we can't tell from brick and mortar. But the online things we can. I'll look and see. I'll have to ask about if we have some summary numbers end of year that we can give to you.
Just curious, if the online's going way higher and the others declining, or they're pretty much even, just that trend. Thank you.
I would say that is going to continue to be the trend. Yes, more and more people are shopping online. You can't even find things in the stores now, so you kind of have to shop online. Councilmember Lawson.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Councilmember Bergen said. So I just want to be clear. So because I shop a lot on Amazon, when we buy Amazon, does the city get the tax? I mean, because I see it on there. So for Amazon purchases, the city does get that tax. Is that correct?
That's absolutely true. Yep.
Okay.
And that's where when you both are talking about online, I would probably go to my Amazon and my other places like that, and just do a year-to-year comparison based on those. But yeah, Amazon has been growing and will continue to grow.
And Greg, that's based on delivery address, right? So whoever's delivered that's who gets the sales tax. So
that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Any other questions? All right, I'll keep going. Capital General Fund year-end current projection is about $5 million less. And interestingly enough, it was almost all in the last quarter. We had some ups and some downs through there. The last quarter was pretty rough. The thing that worries me about $5 million less in the capital revenue is that we don't just have a one-year capital plan. We've got a 5-year capital plan. So if you miss revenues in year 1, that means you're probably missing revenues in years 2 through 5. And so we'll have to come up with a plan to balance the CPF throughout there. A couple of other anecdotes. One that's going to help us is the fact that interest in the capital projects fund came in better, so it won't be quite that bad. Capital impact fees dropped for the first time in years, down about $3 million from the prior year. Now we only just put that money aside. We never plan on spending it because it has to grow to a point to where we can spend it on something like we plan to with the animal shelter in 2025. But so it's not gonna we're not gonna have to balance for that, but it may hurt those little coffers a little bit. Councilmember Bergen.
On the cap or on the impact fees, because that's kind of unusual since we've had so much development over the years. Is that specific to a particular area that is, one area is lower than another? I know it's regional for the impact fees. Yeah, because just curious
Yeah,
why that would drop off.
You know what? I will, as we always do, if I don't have the answer right in my brain, we'll go ahead and put together a little packet with those responses, and I'll go through and figure that out. I do think that it's area sort of things like the core part of the city had very little going on in 2020, 2024, but I will go and research that and bring you back an answer. Mayor.
Yeah, Greg, wondering if there could be some kind of a guesstimate of what if we charge, we have no transportation impact fee, I think, for commercial properties, but we have it for residential properties. You know, if we could just have some projections, if we did have it for commercial properties. I don't know how we ever got to that point with charging residential and not commercial, but it'd be interesting to see what those numbers would be and if that would plug some of this, plug some of the hole.
See what we can do with that. All right, I have those. Anything else on this? All right, let's give you some good news now.
Yay.
Other funds, yeah, that's right. Other funds year end, marijuana tax revenue fund. That's been one of the ones that we've been worried about. Our 2024 revenues were currently 8% below 2023. We were guessing that it was going to drop by 10, and it only dropped by 8. So that's actually good news for us. Some underspending in that fund, so we're going to research this more. It's going to be underspending in places where, like the homelessness and the youth violence, where the money would just go right back into that area. So, but that's good news for the fund. Other funds that were doing well, a lot of pros funds were doing well. The golf funds, CTF, recreation, open space, parks development, all had better revenues than projected. So that's good stuff. The cultural fund did better so far. So we'll be researching that, looking into that, but that looks like good news. Development review had a great year. Even though building material use tax was down, development review, we had a lot of reviews going on in 2024. So that ended up pretty well. E911 and also wastewater. There's some that need some work. So I'm not going to say that they're down or bad or whatever, what have you yet, but they need some work. So fleet, looking into some revenue shortfalls in the fleet fund. Risk fund had some expenses at the year end that we didn't project. So we're going to have to look through that one as well. Community development fund just had some missing revenues that we're researching, that'll probably be fixed over time. Gifts and grants just had some more expenditures that we need to put in, and then the water fund had some fixes too. So there's just ones. It's just too early for me to tell you good news or bad news. Mayor Kaufman.
So if on the pros funds like the golf, if that is robust relative to the projections, are those dedicated funds by ordinance or do they go into the general fund?
No, they're dedicated by ordinance, and golf specifically is an enterprise fund, so it acts like a business on its own. But they're all specific to their own fund and would stay with their own fund.
That's right. Okay.
All right, Councilmember Jerminski.
Yeah, thank you. One point of contention for me, I think, has always been the fact that we are supplementing $10 million a year out of the general fund into the pros fund. So when we say they're doing well, that's very vague. Is this somewhere where we can look at not having to supplement them $10 million out of the 2025 or 2026 budget? I just would like more clarification on what doing well means.
Oh yeah, well, go ahead.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the revenue real quick, and then I'll talk about kind of the policy direction council's given us and how we're moving in that direction.
And there's some questions later that are specific to that. As I had said in the beginning, we're really early on, and so these are initial looks. I would say that with each of these, there's some rules involved in the spending and such like that we do have the ability in some cases to move some costs around from general fund to other funds and do that sort of thing. And when I say it's doing well, typically it's versus our projections. So we projected that we were going to end the year with so much funds available, and we've got a little bit more.
Okay.
And more information to come, by the way, because this is very early on. You know, we might find an expenditure that we just didn't book yet. That happens all the time. And so as we come through, we will make sure to let you know how it really ended up.
And as Greg said, so yeah, this is certainly better than projection, but long term, you know, we came to council last year. We talked about increasing our cost recovery. So those efforts continue on the rec fund. So we are certainly moving in that direction, and we'll give you guys a more detailed update as we kind of finalize the year and start planning for next year. So that's one of our discussions about the ability to potentially shift costs to some other funds as we talk about balancing 2026 and beyond. That's one of the options we want to talk to you all about. And we've already had that discussion with council that you all want that recreation fund moving towards, you know, a better cost recovery than we currently are. So reducing that subsidy. So that's part of our plans. But, you know, this is, as Greg said, kind of just against projection, but then long term, we're going to continue that trajectory.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lawson.
Yes, Greg. So just kind of going back to the marijuana tax revenues fund, when you say that there's been some underspending, we'll research this more. And I'm asking the question towards the youth violence prevention program. I know you can't give me the answers right now, but when you're talking about underspending, I've been always concerned about the spending in this program and how it's been to FTEs. I mean, you guys just posted a job for $90,000 to $100,000, $80,000 to $900,000 for a program manager. And I have always been concerned about things going to I know you have to have individuals to run the programs, but it seems my concern has always been with this program is going to programs that are going to help the youth specifically. It seems like it goes to training and consulting and program managers who are making all this money. And I haven't really seen, I know the program's doing a little bit better, but can you just tell me specifically, and in your notifications to us, will you provide what this underspending is? Because I would really like to know for the youth violence prevention program based on the current budget that I received.
Yeah, we'll put it down in the packet. Yeah, I think that the question, I guess I'm not the best person to ask about what we're spending it on.
Okay, I guess I was just asking, when you're saying about underspending, doing more research in the analysis,
yes.
I would like to know specifically for the youth violence prevention program, as well as the homeless program, but youth violence prevention, because again, my concern with this program, and has been since it's been in its implementation, has been, is the money going towards programs to help the youth instead of all these other things, trainings and giving people $80,000 to $90,000 for a position, which has been, you know, people have cycled through this program manager position since I've been on here, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But I just really would like an in-depth analysis of what they're underspending in this particular program. So thank you.
And you, Councilmember Sundberg.
I have a request, Greg. When we analyze our PROS funding and the subsidies for it, can we also look back 6 years ago, 10 years ago to see that percentage of subsidies? Was it more self-sufficient 10 years ago? Maybe how have the recreation centers affected it? And maybe a leadership change, positive or negative? It's hard to, not placing blame
so
on
yeah, Councilmember, yeah, we can absolutely include that as we look at that, and you're absolutely right. Part of that, as we've looked at that subsidy over time, we've added a number of rec centers, and so I think when we're talking about increasing our cost recovery in those discussions with council, we're really trying to focus on those programmatically, right? Like, what is the expectation of each rec center? What's the expectation for the different programs? And then, you know, look at that over time, because when we go back 6 to 10 years, you're exactly right. We've added a number of recreation centers in that time. So, but we can look at that and then take that into account as we talk about the historic change of the rec fund over time.
Yep, absolutely. Mayor Kaufman.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. On the marijuana issue, I think it would be, unless you all know, it would be good to put the question to our Washington lobbyists as to where are we as a country in terms of the federal government. I know the Biden administration started the process of legalizing marijuana at the federal level to where the tax policy would dramatically change and would help stabilize and make the industry more profitable. So I don't know where that process is at this time. So unless anybody knows on staff, it'd be good to, that'd be something for Liz Rogers to ping our Washington lobbying firm and for Councilmember Lawson, chairman of the Pfizer committee, to be able to report on at some point.
Okay, we will ask that question.
Okay.
Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you. On the marijuana funds, can you remind me, I think we allocate 2% to homelessness, 1% to youth violence prevention. Obviously, we have the rec centers that we also pay down debt. And then are we still doing the transportation that or was that a one-time?
No, we're still doing some transportation. We're shaving some of the transportation costs back in the 2020, I think 2027 timeframe. And that fund, that marijuana tax revenue fund, is balanced throughout the 5 years. But we still, throughout the 5-year plan, we're giving something over to capital projects fund and realistically over to the transportation maintenance fund as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions on this? Great, let me keep going. All right, so then let's talk about general fund balancing and what we're looking to do for 2026. Things we must do: we need to balance the previous pro forma. There's $11.5 million ongoing. That includes the loss of the OPT and then more shortfall after that. And then cover anything else that comes up between now and then. So what we're talking about is revenue changes outside our projection, expenditure changes outside our projection, the 2026 budget in here, or 2026 projection. It's all based on assumptions and math, and those assumptions can and will change. And so we'll have to pivot and be available for that, for those changes. So $11.5 million, is it going to be painless? Are we keeping up with population growth? The real answer is no. So on a per capita basis, we've actually dropped FTE over time. If you look at this chart, this is kind of an interesting chart showing the population over time of Aurora, and then the FTE associated per thousand per capita. Public safety, more keeping up. So back way back in 2003, we're sitting at about 4.45. It's kind of been the same. Everybody kind of dropped off when Jason caused the recession, the Great Recession in 2010. We dropped some FTE in there, and then it's been climbing a little bit since. Non-public safety had the same thing, 3.63 FTE. We're down about 17% over the 20 years. So population keeps going up. We're sort of flattened from a non-public safety perspective. And the point on this is that services don't go away. Services over time are increasing. They're not staying the same. People are doing more. So the cuts won't be painless. The other thing I want to talk about cuts, when you're talking about $11.5 million, it kind of has to come from FTE, right? So personal services in total in the general fund makes up 64% of the budget. And if you take out the transfers, it's even more. It's 3/4 of your budget. So in order to get to $11 million, you pretty much have to affect services. We're basically people providing services to other residents. This will affect service levels, and it is I had talked about this before. All vacant right now, as of this time, all vacant general fund non-public safety FTE, if we just got rid of all of them, we still wouldn't have enough to cover this shortfall.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
So
Greg, how much would that number, what would that number be, do you think?
It's around $8 million. And
Okay.
that's assuming that, that all those FTE are unnecessary, which is not the case.
Understood, understood.
So I've got some questions that I want to bring forward because that we're kind of in a new place where council has given us some direction in an ordinance to do certain things. So we need to kind of talk about those. Out of these balancing ideas, we're assuming that these are they valid? I guess I'd like your point. We're thinking that they're valid. You've already talked. You've given the city manager the ruling to take domestic violence cases to the county. So we're going to be planning on that. Hearing no dissension.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry, what is that, $3 million? Is that-
It was up to three. That number
Oh,
is
the
kind of
savings?
it's up to $3 million, but it's up to it. I think that Jason, I think maybe you can speak to this. It's kind of floating.
Yeah, it's part of this, as you all got into this, I think one of the things you looked at is sort of domestic violence, what does that look like for caseload, for workload, for the different components of the municipal court. And I think at some point there was an estimate that was prepared when you look at all that and sort of do that as a pro rata percentage against those different operations. It looked to be about 3 million if that there was indeed a corresponding cut to the existing staffing levels. That's why we say up to 3 million. That's going to be, I think, a discussion that each of those components, and those components are primarily, in judicial and court administration, in the city attorney's office and the public defender, as to where those workloads and case volumes are going to shift. And then it'll be a discussion for council as to how much and what you want to cut from staffing, given that shift out of the municipal court.
And hey, Jason, it's Pete, and I'll let you know, and I think because of the date, Greg, that, we're going to start sending those cases to the county, we're probably not going to see any savings this year. It's probably not going to start until 2026. So just to be aware of that, so there may not be any money this year that we can use for next year. So.
Yeah, and that's, thanks, Pete. Yeah, that's, and exactly, when we're talking about balancing ideas, all of this is with an eye towards 2026. Council's adopted the 2025 budget. And to put a little bit finer point on what Pete's comment is, we are still planning for the resolution from council to begin writing domestic violence cases into county court July 1st. But as we've talked about in the past, there are a number of cases that will have been written both in 2024 and through the first part of this year that will make their way through the municipal court system. So the existing staffing we have is to essentially through the remainder of this year to kind of work through those cases that have either already been written or will be written before we begin sending those over to the county. So as Pete said, yeah, there's an expectation
2027. I'm trying to keep my years straight this morning on a Saturday. No, it would be 2020. I think 2027 that we would see, that workload drop, but just keep that in mind, Greg. Oh.
Okay. All right. Another thing that we have used in the past for balancing is and it's exactly what we just talked about with Councilmember Jurinsky, is transferring costs to other funds. PROS related E911 funds are examples of what we've done in the past. We're assuming that's going to be okay. All right. Here's an interesting one. As part of the $11.5 million into the shortfall in the pro forma, there's a proposed fire station built into that. We could save $2.5 million by not opening proposed fire station. What do you think?
Where is that fire
Whoa.
station located at again?
Yeah. Let the bloodletting begin.
So
Jason,
part of
you
that
wanna
is,
speak
again,
to that?
the purpose of this is obviously when we talk about having an $11 million shortfall, that is assuming that, as Greg said, there are some cost increases built in there. So we do have staffing for one fire station in the 2026 budget. And again, we're not saying we're proposing this, but again, it is, we want to make sure that council's aware that there's one fire station in there. Is that about a valid assumption? Do we continue with that? If that's the direction, we will, but we just want to make sure that everybody understands that there's one fire station in the 2026 budget, the staffing for one fire station in the 2026 budget at this point.
Councilmember Bergen.
Yeah, extremely concerning to me, if we can only open one fire station for staffing. Again, South Shore, Blackstone have been waiting 20 years for their fire station. So I'm very concerned about response times. I'm especially concerned with what we saw in the Los Angeles area with the huge wildfires that spread throughout and just created devastation. I have constituents that are even more concerned now since that episode, and asking how are we going to be able to, if there was some massive fire, how would we be able to respond? I've talked to the fire chief since then, and also to our director of water, just to make sure that we can provide water in those kind of instances. I think we have the water. It's just, do we have the resources to be able to spread throughout the city, depending upon a massive fire. So I hope we can find some funds to alleviate that really bad situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Sundberg.
I might be getting ahead a little bit, and this is a whole other discussion or presentation, I suppose, but doesn't Aurora have one of the lowest overall lodging taxes in the nation and with comparable cities? And is there an opportunity there for an impact fee for transportation and or public safety?
Yeah, I'm working on that, Councilmember Sundberg. This is Jurinski.
Can you provide a little bit more information?
I'm happy to hear, or it's going to come forward to discuss through
How about
policy.
briefly here, just some nuts and bolts of it real briefly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Pete, do you remember the numbers that we ran on what a 1 or a 2% increase would be on that lodging tax?
So I'm gonna toss over to Greg because I know Greg was involved I can see him pulling his stuff up.
Hello, we also have Jeff Edwards on. I think he's been working on this as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great point. Jeff, are you on?
I am on. I don't have the revenue numbers. I do have some of the tax rates that we were looking at. I'm trying to find Trevor Vaughn, I think, had some kind of numbers that he put together for revenues, and I'm looking for those right now.
Yeah, Jeff, are we sitting at 8%?
Yes.
Okay, so 8% is getting us $9.7 million, so about $1 million per. Little over $1 million for every percent.
Right, and there's some intricacies. There's some intricacies in there on how much goes to Visit Aurora. I just had Jeff do a study for me that he did a great job on, giving me some comparisons to some surrounding cities and what that looks like, where we are at in comparison. There is definitely room there to make that increase. It is something that has to go to the ballot. So I have further been working on that as of, I think, just within the past 2 weeks. Jeff Edwards and I have been looking at this and working on this. I plan to bring something forward to take to the ballot this year, but I think, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think one of the numbers that I was told is that I think a 1.5% increase is something like could be potentially like $8 million. The other option, and something that is in the works, is to approach, and this meeting is being set up, to approach Ryman Property Group, because as of right now, as we all know, the Gaylord is totally tax exempt on all of our taxes. But I feel it is worth having a conversation with them about if we do a tax increase, at least giving us that difference. So if it is 1.5%, 1%, whatever we as a body decide on to bring to the ballot, whatever that amount is, I am working on setting up a meeting to potentially fly out to the Ryman Property Group and have a meeting with them on giving us whatever that raises. So if it's 1%, 1.5%, coming to an agreement, they would at least give us that difference, which that would be a huge increase to our lodging tax.
All right. Councilmember Gardner.
So just to be clear, we had a tax in place that the majority of this council voted to get rid of. And now the idea is to replace it with literally another tax that we have to go to the voters for to do exactly the same thing we could have accomplished 3 months ago. Not funding a fire station literally means people will die. That is not an option that I'm willing to accept. And I find it interesting that that's always one of the first places that we choose to go after is the fire department budget. You know, the public safety budget overall, I think it's what, 70% of our total expenditures. And yet it's always fire that's on the chopping block. It's always fire that doesn't get the pay increases. It's always fire that doesn't get on and on and on and on. And I don't understand that, why it is that they're always an easy target. We have areas of this city that are literally outside of standards for response times, including, to Councilmember Bergen's point, southeast portions of the city, where if somebody has a serious incident, they are likely to die because of the response times in that area. And now we're talking about going to voters, so we're delaying it another year for a tax increase when we literally had a tax in place that could have accomplished the same thing. I don't understand this at all.
Right. Councilmember Casal.
All right. So my question is, without tax increase, did we try to see a federal grant in order to help the fire station?
So I can let Councilmember.
You can't for
I can let.
staff.
Well, hang on. I'll let Chief Otten kind of talk a little bit about. We are looking at a potential for some grant sources to potentially examine this. There are no guarantees. And then that grant would only be for a temporary period of time. But Chief Otten, if you want to talk a little bit about the SAFER grant that we're going after. Chief Otten, you're muted if you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I appreciate the conversation, and you know, I've heard the council members loud and clear, specifically related to the urgency of filling in both gaps. We are trying to do what we can as the fire department to supplement the funding. We are currently looking at the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, the SAFER grants that are federal grants. And we were a little concerned when we heard about the freeze, but it sounds like this process, we're looking for a notice of funding opportunity at any point. This will provide up to 3 years of money for the ongoing, for the payroll expenses associated with opening these 2 fire stations. And so essentially it would be about $5 million a year for 3 years to give us as a city time to figure out if there are revenue streams that can help support this, because I know a lot of that takes some time, not just to get through the ballot process, but also to start to realize the funding. So we are looking at that. We're building that grant request right now, with the hopes that we can get the funding for both fire stations immediately and then give a 3-year window to try and close that funding gap. And so, Mr. Manager, hopefully that touched on what you wanted me to touch on. And I'd be happy to try and answer any questions about that process that any of the council members may have.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jurinsky.
Yeah, thank you. So Chief Otten, thank you for that input. I have recently met with you and was excited to hear about all of these different grants that you guys are applying for. For my colleague to jump to the conclusion that we're even discussing not opening a fire station, I don't think that's an option that any of us are willing to look at. I think that that's something that Greg and staff put on here as an idea. I think that's a non-starter for all of us unanimously across the board. So to say that we're immediately jumping to cuts in fire, that's a little embellished. Also, the tax that we got rid of was worth roughly $6 million. We are looking at an $11.6 million deficit for 2026. So clearly we were already in big trouble. Clearly we were already overspending in different places. And that tax that we did away with had never been voted on by the voters. And I would think that as part of libertarian principles, you would want any tax to be voted on by the people and not just put in place without their input, which is how that tax started. Also, this tax, the lodging tax, this isn't a tax on Aurora businesses or Aurora, the citizens of Aurora. This is a tax on people coming into Aurora and from wherever else they're coming from, and they are in fact paying the tax. So it is people from outside of Aurora paying this tax, which I think the voters will go for, and have it be a dedicated fund for public safety. And you know, these shortfalls have been in the works here for years, for years, and that means when we originally voted to repeal the OPT 2 years ago, this would have been known. But fire representation hasn't. I've been on the Public Safety Committee now going on my 4th year on this council, and fire had never come forward and expressed any sort of dire situations like this. But now we know it's here. I think it is most appropriate to have people vote on a tax increase. And I think it is also most appropriate to not have this tax be on the people of Aurora. There's a significant gap. Denver's at 11.75%. We're at 8%. There's certainly some wiggle room for us to look at our lodging tax, but to make a blatant accusation that we're just immediately targeting fire is absolutely an unfounded statement. And I don't think that just because it says it on the screen here, I don't think any one of us have come out and said that that's even an option that we are willing to discuss.
Yes, we were just asking the question. Councilmember Sundberg.
This is for the benefit of my own understanding, and maybe I haven't been on council long enough, but Councilmember Gardner, you said that we are the first to go after the fire department for cuts. Do you have any examples for me of that, where we've gone after the fire department for cuts? I can't remember.
Mayor, is this in line with the discussion right now? Like, I feel like we're going to get in this.
Trying to track, first of all,
we're getting in this match. It's really embarrassing.
No, I'd like to. This is where we're finding money, aren't we? Where there's a discussion.
Well, we cut the money. We cut the money specifically, and now we're talking about.
Can you raise your hand?
I don't know. Are you the chairman of the meeting?
Councilmember Sundberg has the floor right now. Please go ahead, Councilmember Sundberg.
Oh,
I'm just respectfully seeking some clarity from Councilmember Gardner. There's probably there's some things I'm overlooking, but I don't recall just simply targeting the fire department in the past. If I could get an answer, please.
Is there further discussion, further questions? Okay. Let's see,
Mayor.
Greg, go ahead.
Okay.
Mayor,
Uh,
Councilmember Murillo.
Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you. No, first of all, I'm frustrated that we're having this conversation. I'm frustrated we're having this conversation when we explicitly had conversations about the OPT and how even trying to dedicate it towards things like the fire station. Staff they're having to execute the decisions that we make as a body. So they're apolitical, they're coming up with potential ideas. I wouldn't support that, but we're asking them to do the impossible. They told us many times that we were going to have a deficit over and over again before voting for that, removing OPT, and we still went for it. So yeah, we're dealing with the consequences, and staff has to ask the question about where that's going to come from, and that's how that works. So yeah, I'm just frustrated that we're having this conversation. We contributed to this situation.
Please, questions of Greg?
All right. The next one on my list is this is just an assumption, what we've used in the past. We're going to be looking at programmatic reductions as opposed to some sort of across the board. Everybody gets cut the same. I'm hearing no dissension on that topic, so I think that we're on the right page in looking at that as well. Some outstanding questions based on the OPT thing. It had some sort of general statements. Must not cut public safety. I'd like to have a little bit of a discussion here about what public safety is, right? So if we're talking just the civil positions only in police and fire, or is it all police and fire? And then widening that out. Is it E911? Is it the court system as well? So and then widening that even more. We've got other people like civil service. HR has a thing that's hiring police and fire. And then even one further step out, like PROS has rangers. That we don't typically put them in our list of public safety, but I kind of wanted to have this conversation with you all about what is it that you feel is public safety. Councilmember Bergen.
Unmute myself. Can we get some statistics on what percentage is 911, the civil service, the PROS, in terms of their overall budget?
Absolutely. I kind of was hoping that somebody would ask that question, so I put the general fund expenditures by department up here. You can kind of see when we talk about public safety in the budget book, we use courts and legal, police, and by the way, that's all police. So even like not just the police officers, but also the other positions and the people that take the calls and everybody in police. There's your Aurora 911 sitting in at 2%. This is fire, and by the way, this is all of fire, not just the firefighters, but the people that pay the bills in fire and everybody else that's in there. All of this is around 56%.
Okay, so police, fire, those are all administrative positions, obviously, as well.
They're in there as well. And so what our question is it all of police that shouldn't be cut, or is it only the career service in police, which is going to be a portion of the largest portion, but a portion therein?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at what is the impact on the public. So, I mean, this one's a little bit more difficult to define right off the bat in a workshop. But I think, we have to make sure to ensure safety first for residents, and whether that even be in the parks, right? I mean, we have incidents that have occurred in some of our parks and people don't feel safe. So this one's really, I think, a tough one for me.
Okay,
Let me say,
safety
Greg.
first. Yes, Mayor Kaufman.
Yeah, Greg, let me just say on the police side, we have pushed the police department to civilianize more positions that were done by sworn officers, to free up the sworn officers to do those things that civilians can't do, that only post-certified police officers can do. So I would not be in favor of touching any part of the police department.
Okay, okay. Councilmember Jurinski.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would just ask if we could get through this entire presentation and then scrutinize where we are willing to look at cuts, because again, I think, well, I hope unanimously that going after police or fire, or anything to do with public safety is not an option. I don't feel as confident that that would be a unanimous vote by this body. But I would just ask, can we please get through all of these slides and then go back and dissect where we think cuts should happen?
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I think if somebody has questions, they ought to be able to ask them as we're moving through the presentation. No, please proceed.
Okay. So anyway, that's a question that we would need some input on. The other thing that came out of the OPT things, you must not cut road maintenance, kind of making the assumption that that's the capital transfer only. Because there are also people in the general fund that work on roads. So where do those fit in there? As I pointed out in the chart, if you're saying all of public safety shouldn't be touched, that means that the cuts are in the rest of the funds, about 40%. Then other questions. So Jason does not have the authority to ask all of the council appointees to cut. Council has that authority to do so. So our council appointees expected to cut. Besides the domestic violence, you've already given that order. And then also is council on this as well. So there's some questions where we would need your help. Do you want me just to go to the end and then come back, or do we? There's a couple of other questions that I would need some input as well.
Well, let's is there objection to cutting council's budget, putting that on the table? Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
What is the percentage to the budget on that?
Oh, very, very little. Oh my gosh. Council is a third of 1% of the general fund budget, but it's more of everybody that's non-public safety supposed to be playing ball. Is the real question.
I'm fine with that. Just wanted to for the public to understand that it's a very, very small percentage, but I'm happy to make cuts.
We could cut you all 10 times over. Yeah.
And still not get there.
And still not get there. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts or comments on this slide? All right.
Just a quick question. What is the legislative? I know that's just 1%. Is that just the paying of our lobbyists from the state and federal, or is that just the?
No, that's council.
Oh, that's council.
In this situation, that's council.
Okay.
Paying of the lobbyists would be in the administration and support and general management.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
I do think that vacancy savings in non-public safety should be a consideration.
Yep. Okay.
Again, going back
temporary, but should be a consideration.
Again, going back to as we approach 2025 budget, we have significantly increased vacancy savings target. So we have a pretty high assumption in built in. But yeah, Mayor, we'll keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? Okay, go ahead, Greg.
All right. Here's some other thoughts that I would like you to give us some input on. Some revenue ideas. Are revenue ideas okay? It sounds like you're okay with it. Councilmember Jurinski is already working through some revenue ideas. We were talking about raising fees. We could eliminate some exemptions. This is just a short list of some exemptions that we've got. And I've got Jeff Edward to talk about it, but I mean, there's some big ticket items here. We quite a long time ago exempted food for home consumption. That's a big number that we leave on the table. $34 to $50 million. Prescription drugs, 16 million. Some smaller ticket items there, animal prescription drugs, manufacturing equipment would all help. So I guess we would want your input on is it okay for us to even look into these worlds? We would also want your input on what about tax increases? Sales tax would 0.25% sales tax would be quite the boon for the city. Property tax has a couple different pieces to it, increasing the mills, but also debrucing. We're one of the few that where our property tax is affected by the Tabor statute, and debrucing. This last year, we gave back around $17 million in our property taxes. So, and that number would adjust from year to year to year, but this year was around $17 million. So, and I'm not sure how to do this anymore, but would you like to provide some input on any of this?
Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, obviously, we have the infrastructure task force next on the agenda that will talk about some potential ballot measures. Regarding elimination of exemptions, I mean, I think we have to be really careful on how that affects our residents currently in light of inflation and just people maybe struggling with, you know, expenses for homes and for all their necessities. So I think it'd be really tough to go from we don't tax groceries to all of a sudden, boom, we tax groceries. Maybe, I mean, maybe some of these would be phased in over a long period of time. That might be an idea, but it doesn't sound appealing to me off the bat. I have a question on the manufacturing equipment. That one's curious to me why it would not be taxed. That seems odd.
Jeff, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, so we have some exemptions that have been in place for a long time. This is one of them. And I think the main thing with manufacturing equipment exemption is to attract manufacturing companies to the city, which we do have a handful of manufacturing companies within the city that take part of this exemption.
And we estimated that to be 333,000. How did you come up with that?
You know what? These are some of these are very difficult to estimate. I believe this one came from a state study based off of population. So the state had a study that said this was about the amount of tax that's associated with manufacturing equipment, and then we kind of related that to our population. It's pretty rough, but it probably wouldn't be a significant amount. Our largest exemptions are by far food for home consumption, prescription drugs.
And the manufacturing equipment, the data, that number wasn't tied to what we currently have for manufacturing.
No, unfortunately, we don't get a lot of information from our taxpayers on this. So we don't have a specific line item for manufacturing exemptions on our tax returns. So we don't have the actual data.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Recognize myself and then Councilmember Coombs after me. Well, I did mention the transportation impact fee on commercial property, commercial developments before, something we should look at. But I really think that fees should be commensurate with their cost of delivery. And we should be adjusting those on an annual basis to reflect actual cost. Obviously, we've discussed cost recovery for pros, things that aren't enterprise funds. And then I think, and hopefully I'll hear about this in the next presentation, but certainly debrucing property tax for law enforcement related purposes for public safety. I think that the public would support that. I don't think they'd support it for any other reason. Councilmember Coombs.
Thanks, Mayor. So in Arapahoe County, at least, which is the majority of the city of Aurora, folks did vote to debruce property tax for a wide range of uses that were not limited to public safety just this last year. And so it seems like there is some willingness and some understanding of the value of debrucing. I do wonder if we end up putting a whole bunch of different tax-related questions on the ballot, how that ends up affecting our ability to be successful with a debrucing of property tax. And that debrucing of property tax immediately covers our shortfall and then some. So I really think that that's a reasonable place for us to focus. We maybe don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, but I think we also want to be very careful about overloading the ballot with tax questions.
Let me just say one thing real quick on Councilmember Coombs on law enforcement related, because that could be also the capital parts of not just the operational budget, but the capital parts of that too. Is anybody
So
else?
So Mayor, real quick, just on that point, I think one of the things we've talked about on some of these tax increases, you're going to hear from the infrastructure task force. And I think for all of this, including the direction we're getting today, we are going to keep council informed. We're going to coordinate all of these discussions when we're looking at tax increases, be they for operational needs or be they for capital needs. So we will coordinate all those discussions as you all have just discussed. All of it has to go to voters. We need to make sure that we are moving forward with any efforts in a coordinated fashion. So just for example, council could go to the voters with a debrucing question, and part of that debrucing could go for capital needs, and part of it could go for operating needs. So there are ways to go to voters and again, coordinate these two efforts, right? We have to balance our operating needs and balance our capital needs.
Okay. Let me say one thing. Whatever course we take, I would like to see a third-party economic analysis of the impact on our local economy, whether it's increasing the the lodging tax or any other. What is the impact on our local economy in terms of our competitiveness as a city? Okay. Further discussion on this? Okay.
Okay. So next steps from this, we're almost done. We're having this discussion today on February and March. We're going to close out 2024, update our expenditure projections, update our revenue forecast. We did talk with Leeds. They're planning on giving us their projection in early to mid-March. So we'll have some pretty good time to provide that forecast to you all. Following up on today's guidance, I've got a couple pages worth of things here for us to work on. And then at the spring workshop, we're going to come back and discuss with council again final approaches. We're going to talk about CPF balancing and then anything else that needs to be talked about. So that's it. Do you have any questions, any input besides the pages that you've already given me?
Greg?
Yes.
So for me, when we talk about projections, there's a couple things that I would like to see. I would like to see a projection from the PROS department about if they are doing well and headed in the right direction, which I know that Brian Green and Laura Perry are working extremely hard on this. Can we see what those projections are to lowering that $10 million supplement from the general fund? We have the domestic violence projection on there. Can we also include things like when we recently hired Pete Schulte as the city attorney? I just spoke with him recently, and he believes that already to date, he has saved the city roughly $200,000 over what his predecessor had been doing. And I think that he had a projection of $2 or $3 million of savings just from his department alone. Can we include that projection? Also, the Lamar's signs, which is something that I was interested in revenue generation for the city, as well as better communication with our residents. Can we put that revenue projection in there as well, so that we are really looking at a whole picture?
Okay.
Is there any further questions or comments? So the time is now 10:07. Let's take a break let's go to 10:20. We'll reconvene at 10:20. now 11:20 and city council is back in session. Let's see, Councilmember Gardner. Councilmember Bergen. Laura Perry.
Sure. Good morning,
no.
City Council.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Good morning, City Council. Laura Perry, Deputy City Manager. Today, we are joined by R.D. Seawald with Seawald Handling and Jake Zambrano with the 76 Group to provide an update with a public affairs focus for the council on the infrastructure task force work. So R.D. and Jake, I will turn it over to you and I'll share my screen for you all.
Thank you so much, Laura. And Monica is going to run the deck for, oh, you got it. Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That works.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jake Zambrano with the 76 Group with me today from my firm is Monica Burton and Crystal Essman and RD.
Yes, good morning, Mayor, council members, and to the city team. RD Seawald, Seawald Handling Public Affairs, and along with myself, I have Tate Carpenter, who's been a part of the team in conjunction with the 76 Group, working to prepare for the next year on outreach. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, our goal today is give you a high-level glimpse into the plan and the program we've been putting together. The task force has met a couple of times since your appointment. And we're going to walk through some of our ideas on outreach and communications and how we plan to drive to finality on a question and what that process is going to look like. So with that, we will tick through a slide deck for you real quick. It's not a terribly long deck, but Laura, next slide. So we engaged with the city, RD and I did, both of our firms engaged with the city back in November and began putting together this plan to take eventually what we think will be a question, not knowing what that question will be, to voters in the fall of 2026. RD and I have been a part of several local tax initiative campaigns all over the Front Range, Western Colorado and Eastern Plains. And when Laura and Jason and your council members and your council colleagues approached us about the opportunity to work on this project, both RD and I didn't hesitate. We both, Aurora is near and dear to both of us. I've lived in Aurora for 25 years. RD and his partner have done a lot of work in Aurora over the years. And so for us, it's a labor of love. And this was something that we absolutely wanted to be a part of. RD, do you want to say a couple of opening words?
No, I think that's right. It is really nice to work on this, having grew up out in Aurora and went to Smoky Hill High School. But I think that, you know, when we walk you through this presentation, Mayor and council members, the two co-chairs have made it very clear. They want to make sure that we're communicating back to you through this process. And I think the most important piece for us, because we've been through several successful questions, and we don't know what that'll be yet, because we're honoring what you have been discussing even in the first hour, is making sure that you understand fully where you want to go, understanding what the voters will do and what they won't do, and then also trying to address the needs of the city of Aurora, from infrastructure to continue to provide that service to your constituents, both residential and commercial. And so with that, we'll kind of run through this deck. And I would say, our whole goal, just because, having worked for two mayors and two governors and worked on some successful bond questions back to the voters, we come at this, every time we step out, it's like we want to make sure we're doing a way that it's protecting the principals, which is the elected officials and the city and team, so that when we get to the end, no one can challenge or question that we didn't have a very open and transparent process. Thanks, Jake.
You bet. So the first slide, this is kind of our North Star. This is our to-do list, if you will. As RD and I and our teams have worked with the city council members and senior staff, we've started to create a list of targeted thought leaders, decision makers, people who influence other thought leaders and decision makers in and around the city for outreach. And obviously we've started at the elected official level. You all are the decision makers. You all will get to ultimately decide whether you like the task force recommendation or not. And this bingo card, if you will, the goal will be is to get to bingo here, right? Like we're very early in the process. These are areas that we're focusing on today. And we've accomplished a couple of big milestones already with the press launch. You all approved unanimously by resolution the membership of the task force. We're starting to work on research steps and figuring out, hearts and minds of Aurora citizens and where they would like to go. We're doing a very in-depth dive into, what is the problem, and I think Greg, you laid that out earlier this morning, and then how do we solve it? And there is probably more than one solution, more than one answer, and RD and I together have a lot of years of working with all of you elected officials, and we intend and plan to have lots of conversations with you all directly to help shape and guide and determine where the task force heads. So this is our kind of a to-do list, and Laura, if you go to the next slide, we'll do just a little bit of background on how we got here. I won't spend a lot of time here because you all you know this. Councilmember Gardner and then Councilmember Zvonek, probably last summer-ish, started to think about, along with contemplation from all of you, how do we looking at what just happened in Arapahoe, and anticipating the story that you got from Greg this morning, how do we move into the next phase of making sure Aurora is fully funded for the needs of its citizens and also fully funded for opportunities for new business and growth. And you all really are the final frontier when it comes to the Front Range of Colorado and Denver. So that's the thesis. That's the question. RD, did you want to offer any more here?
No, I think after hearing this morning, I think we know what's in front of us. And I just will tell you that we have had nothing but positive on the build up Aurora significance just to the wording of that name. So good here, Jake.
Okay, next slide, Laura. This is just a quick reminder of the folks that you all decided to appoint to the task force. You did this by resolution. You added Mr. Wardrip just Monday night, and in late December, early January, you appointed the rest of the members of this task force. We think this is a good cross-section of representatives of the city and those that have interests in the city from all over the city that will provide really good, sound leadership when it comes to what are the best options. These are people who have worked in and around Aurora for decades now, and the goal of this task force, and RD, I'll let you insert, it's really not come into the table with any preconceived ideas about where we need to end up. You all contemplated some thoughts earlier this morning. If this process is to work, and if we are to get take a truly collaborative approach and drive to a question that all of you and community leaders alike are going to agree to, it has to feel like it's genuine. It has to feel like it's not a fait accompli. And I think that piece is very important to the success of not only the question on the ballot in November of 2026, but our ability as your team to drive to that success. RD?
Yeah, that's correct. And compliments to just every step matters. And the unanimous vote on the task force members, the message that sends to the community When we worked on the one in Commerce City, it was the same thing out the gate. Folks didn't know, meaning council members and mayor did not know where they're going to end up. But at the beginning, that messaging that we needed from you started with the unanimous vote on the task force. Because as we begin to have those community meetings, town halls, working in partnership with you, keeping you informed, just every step matters. And so pleased that it was an action from council and the mayor that let's move forward with the task force. And we're looking to, which you'll see here in a few minutes, of our action items moving forward.
Next slide, Laura. So we talked a little bit about it on the previous slide about how we plan to move through this process. This is a very high level, brief summary of what that's going to look like. The task force meets monthly. It's kind of a hybrid meeting schedule, in person and online. We meet over a meal when it's in person. We really encourage folks, and it's in the evening time, so minimize disruptions to the extent that that's possible these days, and encourage folks to really dig in. The staff has done a great job with providing umpteen pages of background information. You all have a very robust communications department that will, once we decide, allow for really effective streams and channels of communication through your multiple mediums that you have at your disposal. But the real test here will be when we get to the community engagement level, and that is going to be 100% a partnership with you all. RD?
No, that's right, Greg. I mean, Jake, I don't have anything to add on this one because I'm looking forward to the next couple slides. Thanks.
RD, you want to start here?
Sure. I think, with the experience our two firms have of making sure to protect the principals, when we talk about the outreach, we started gathering names, community leaders. The goal for Q25 is exactly what you see on the deck here. And I think when Jake and I with Jason and Laura and your two co-chairs, what we've talked about is we need to make sure that we're setting you all up for success, that other elected officials, school boards, community leaders, chambers, whatever, they come back. They actually know what you're laying out, the groundwork moving forward over the next 3 quarters. So we are planning that out now. We will come back and meet with you again repeatedly. We've heard that from the co-chairs and Laura and Jason. The one thing we don't want to have is you show up at a town hall meeting or a neighborhood because there was an issue. So we are working hard to implement Q1 and Q2 so that people understand the actions that council's taking with no predetermined idea, tax, because again, we are honoring the process that you set out. And we're looking forward to on Q2 on 2025. You see the research there, which I'll ask Jake to speak to in a second, because we both have done that hundreds of times in the state of Colorado. But again, your feedback will be crucial. We want to make sure we have your list, and so we will honor that moving forward.
Yeah, and all that to say, this is going to be a research-driven exercise. The task force is very focused on, we all have our own priorities. You are all political in nature. Obviously, you ran for political office. And so, one, you have priorities. 2, you have notions of what should be done with if there was this windfall of extra revenue. The piece that RD and I have been very focused on with staff and the co-chairs is that process is driven by quantitative research, that we have to get a good understanding of hearts and minds of all of the people that elected all of you, all of the people that we work for and your senior staff works for, to make sure we're talking about things that are a priority. And it's going to be, it'll take discipline on everybody's part, because there will be, some notion to think, my ward first, or, this project first. But we've really impressed upon the task force that while they all come from your different stakeholders within the city. So even in their prism, they're going to have priorities. So it's important that quantitative research really drives this decision-making process, and we're taking the steps now to get that put in place so that we're making informed decisions from what we bring you, and it's not pie in the sky, or it's not what we think, or what somebody has a hunch about, that it's all driven by quantitative research. So next slide, Laura. I'm sorry.
Can I add one piece, Jake? Because I think it's important for the mayor and then the council members to understand that when we look at that, in Q2, when we do the survey / poll, we're being sensitive that it needs to be big enough for the citywide piece, and then really understanding each ward. So we're actually getting really good, valuable information as we go into the communities. For the first poll, understand where people are, outreach, so that we can frame out the needs, including what the city needs to maintain its infrastructure, whether that's roads or rec center or fire. And then coming back, and we will have plans to do that twice for you. What I found out in the years that I've done in other cities, Wheat Ridge, Commerce City, Denver, we need to make sure that we're giving you the most relevant information back from your constituents about what they think is important and what they want. And we plan to do that through this process of what we're laying out here in the outreach and community outreach piece.
Next slide, Laura. The comm strategy up to date is pretty simple. We had a really successful launch a couple of weeks ago out at Murphy Creek. We had very good press coverage for a week that also saw the opening of the legislative session. I think that, again, I mentioned it earlier, you have really strong communications channels already with your residents. You all, near as I can tell, have very effective town hall strategies. Everybody seems to be determined, and they set their watch to making sure those happen. We will get to the point in Q3 and Q4 where RD and our team will offer ourselves up to come to your town halls and do a presentation and a task force update once the questions start to bubble down into 2, 3, or 4 options, so you can directly get feedback from your constituents real time in the room. And then obviously we're going to do HOA, metro districts, and make sure we're touching the boards and thought leaders and policymakers of the individual neighborhoods in the city. And your neighborhood services department has been very helpful with getting us set up and ready to deploy on that action as well. RD?
No, and nothing to add at this point. Thank you.
That concludes our briefing this morning, council members and Mr. Mayor. Any questions from the team?
Should I go ahead?
Mr. Mayor, I think Francoise has a question.
I just wanted to add the fact that we are also disclosing conflicts of interest as part of our task force. So I just wanted to mention that for the public. So if we have any conflicts of interest, that we would disclose that ahead of time.
Mayor?
All right, questions?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Hancock.
I was wondering, will there be an online option as well for the surveys for the public? And can we utilize that on our socials, or how's that going to work? Just for my edification, because I'm not clear.
You bet, Councilwoman Hancock. Great question. And the short answer is yes. We're going to have both options. There will be a microsite built that would allow for citizen input at their leisure from their phone or their home computer whenever they determine they'd like to do that. We also will offer the same kind of micro target service at your town halls. We can supply an iPad with the URL pulled up, and people can do that real time. And provide input. Like we could even do a before presentation and after presentation to see, if we changed some hearts and minds within the room during that particular window. There's a lot of fun stuff that we can deploy on your behalf to help you gauge how your constituents are feeling, and also drive to, a larger cadre of data points that we can all pull on for final decision making. RD?
Yeah, and Councilor Hancock, I really do appreciate the question, because we've had several meetings with both the team and also with the task force. And I think if we do our job right, every month we talk about exactly what you just laid out. Did we exhaust all current technology plus the way people like to be communicated to? And we also want to make sure, and Laura and Jason have brought this up repeatedly, we need to do it in a way that when we get to the very end, the way we look at it, no one's going to come back through council when you're looking at potentially doing a referred measure or whatever it is. We need to be knocking off that list every month, making sure that we're doing our job so that at the end, no one walks in the door and say, I didn't hear about this. And we have to honor the way people communicate, whether it's the elderly population or the younger. And we are also very sensitive that we need to have multiples, so that because people work at different hours. And so we need to make sure that with the different communities on how they work, the weekends are tied with family. You will see us not only do weekend outreach meetings, but we'll do some off what we think is when you're not at work. We will have some during the lunch. We will have it at weekends, and then we also do some things during the week because of folks work the weekend. So a great question, and if we do our job correctly, when we get to the end, we'll be able to knock that off. And the team has asked us to raise that issue every month as we go forward in our planning.
Can I just have a quick follow-up? Will there be like information, like bullet points, cliff notes, for lack of a better word, that people can like have a quick view of what is this? What is my input? Why am I doing this? So that they can understand better how and why their input is so important.
Jay, can I take the first shot at this one? Because I think it's a valid point. That's why we were really looking forward to this time with the council members and the mayor. It starts today, even with the question coming in to the press, is this a tax issue or not? The answer is we don't know, because you have all set up a process. It may be, but we're actually honoring the process of this task force and working through hearing this out. And so we will have that, and I think we need to have multiples every month on each piece that comes out that's tied back to the press plan that we lay out, so that you have it and it's consistent coming from the staff, the consultants, and then your neighborhood and business leaders, because we want them every quarter to be on the same page with us with the messaging that starts with the elected officials.
Yeah, and Councilwoman Hancock, Jason and Laura and Kim and her team have done a fantastic job on engageaurora.org. There is a microsite already built out there, Build Up Aurora. So as you run into people at the grocery store or the coffee shop, if folks already have thoughts and are ready to go, there's a great backgrounder there as to, the problem. There's a capital needs outlay that talks about, asphalt to, golf courses, and will really help participants who are plugged into the policymaking process to educate themselves. Then when they come to your town hall meeting, we're not starting at 101. Like the goal with the Engage Aurora page is to be, we're already at 202, right? Now let's dig in, roll up our sleeves, and start to make some educated decisions. And that's Kim and her team have done a great job of kind of laying out the baseline and the problem, and it allows the citizen to start to think about the solution.
Councilmember Lawson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, JD and Jake. I just have a question. So I kind of like to look at things from, I know you don't have everything in step right now, and I appreciate the engagement that's going to happen. But is the long game in here is to get all of the constituent feedback And then eventually this might go to like a question on the ballot, and then kind of see how the implementation will happen based on all the feedback that has happened currently. As you know, we're going to get new residents. So some people, there might be individuals who are coming into the city who won't be able to participate. But I guess, is that kind of the long strategy here, to get something on the ballot, but then future councils will be able to navigate that issue? I'll be term limited, but you know, I'm just looking at the future as well for the input and things like that. So don't mean to go far ahead, but I like to look at things from a forward thinking way as well. So
That's a great question, Councilwoman Lawson. And I always like to give RD a hard time. Like, once the Broncos are constituents in East Aurora, like, they should have some input here too. So, but yes, your thought is spot on. The next 18 months are going to be this public engagement process, task force process. Task force will then bring some options to you all, vis-a-vis your colleagues that are the co-chairs, Councilwoman Bergen and Councilman Gardner. And then I'm sure you all will chew on those options for a while. They may not be what you wanted to see. You may go back and say, task force, we want more options, or, hey, we think this is good, but we should tweak this or that. And then ultimately, probably around this time next year, we're talking about taking a question to the council agenda and you all approving that unanimously for the voters to decide on in November of 2026.
Yes, and Councilwoman, if I could just Mayor, are you okay if I just respond also?
Please, go ahead.
So it's funny because, you know, having worked for 2 mayors and 2 governors and been involved in several ballot initiatives, quite a few, and then also at the state, even going back to the voters at the state level. I think the way I do this, I've served them, now we're serving you. And the mindset is, if we do this right, you set us on this path. I just want to frame this out, Councilwoman, because I think what you're asking for is accurate, and then because your constituents want to understand, I want to make sure it's not preset. And when I say that is, we start down this path, we have legitimate community meetings with you all in partnership, either kicking it off in teams of 2 or 3 to frame it out at different times. And then the feedback is real, because we want them to come in and really, you'll hear, I've done it different ways, but I'll use, you know, the Broncos Stadium last time we went for the 50 yards south of the stadium on development, or Commerce City. There's that window when we start the community process, they come in and you really understand what the way they look at their, not the whole council district, but the way they look at the way they live in Aurora and the impacts and the positives. And so there's that window where we hear them, and then you all get to, as we go out the second time, kind of prioritize the city's needs plus what you've heard from the community. And so we'll go back again, because I keep in mind, when we come back and we're in front of you at City Council and reporting out the whole process, and now you've had legitimate feedback about where you want to go as leaders, plus the impact and the feedback you had from the community, down to blocks, right? Because they will come in at different levels. At that moment in time, it gives you some assurance that now you're prepared to make a decision or not, but at least you have this long, several year process of making sure that you did everything so that when it goes to the ballot, if it does, that campaign gets to hold on to all the work that you're doing, starting with setting the task force. And that's a very important piece for not only the consultants, but you as elected leaders, because I have to talk politics. I got to make sure we're not doing anything in case you want to run for reelection, or you want to, so we got to do it in a way where it's done in a way we're not creating a negative wake, both for the city team and also the elected officials.
Further questions? Great. RD, Jake, you got anything else for us?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Great presentation. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies for my black lab knocking over the print if it was loud. Just for the record. He was telling me he had to go out. See you. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The time is 10:50. Let's take a 5-minute break till 10:55. Time is now 10:55 and council is back in session. Councilmember Bergen. Councilmember Bergen?
All right, I'm here.
Okay.
I had to go
please
grab my
proceed.
coffee.
Retail
Thank-
strategy update.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this has been something that we've been working on for quite some time. In fact, for years, as far as being able to acknowledge the importance of, obviously, of our retail sales tax revenues. So I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Andrea or to Janine.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Councilmember Bergen. And let me start sharing my screen. Are you all seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, thank you, Councilmember Bergen, for being the sponsor on this very important item. And good morning, Mayor and council members. Janine Rustad, Director of Planning and Business Development. And let's see how slow my computer is going to be this morning. Okay, so why are we doing a retail strategy? You've heard a lot about budget this morning, and one of the reasons is retail sales tax are 57% of the general fund revenues. So the retail sales tax are very important to helping the city provide the services that we do as a full service city. The strategy will also help us create and maintain a healthy, vibrant retail economy. And also the retail sector also contributes to other economic sectors. Retail is where both our residents and our business employees shop. So I want to start by pointing out this quote from the article by the National League of Cities. I have this article, should anybody want it. It's got some great case studies in it. But it points out that retail is important to provide not only the shopping, but the gathering spaces. Think the Southlands with all its public gathering spaces. So it also provides an important social infrastructure. The goals of our strategy are to improve merchant profitability, provide attractive shopping centers and shopping experience. Of course, these all tie together. We want to attract more high volume merchants and attract customers that keep them shopping longer. And when I say we want to attract customers, that's both customers from within each ward, from within the city, but equally as important, we want to keep people shopping from outside in the city, and we want to prevent people in the city from going elsewhere to meet those needs. We want to capture that sales tax. You may ask, what is the city's role in retail? If Bob Oliva has come to your ward and given his presentation, you've heard that we are competing for major retailers, not only within Colorado, but nationally. Retailers have the option of where to go, but it's not just about free market. We have a very important role. We have those relationships we're building with the help of many of you, with our strong and mighty retail team, to build relationship with property owners, with businesses, with the property managers, and then also retailers at conventions such as ICSC. We also provide incentives. Nordstrom Rack is one example of the retail sales tax incentives we've successfully provided. And then yesterday in Council Member Lawson's ward, a restaurant just opened using our restaurant program. The government, both staff and our elected officials, can engage with neighborhood-based businesses and economic organizations such as the Havana Bid. As you know, we're studying a potential either bid or downtown development association in the Colfax corridor. Something we're already doing very well is our small business consulting, both our internal city staff and through hosting the SBDC. And then we as a government, as you're going to see on a slide soon, is retail has evolved over time. The evolution has changed exponentially since the pandemic. So we need to be flexible to adapt to the changing times. A little bit about the history of retail development, both within the city and across the nation. Early on, retail started with main streets. Our local example is the Colfax corridor. Then the 1940s through the 1970s came the indoor and regional malls. Example in Aurora is the Town Center Mall. However, much of Aurora's retail developed in the 1980s and 1990s in strip centers. These are located at almost every major arterial intersection. Many of these were small and had maybe one anchor tenant. This is important to note because as we got into the 1990s with the power centers, which these often have multiple national anchors, fewer small local business, we did not get many of these because many of the areas where these would be developed had already developed into those strip centers. In the early 2000s, lifestyle centers became popular. These have a Main Street feel to them. They have many of the public gathering spaces. They combine retail with office and sometimes even residential. Southland's here, the example in Aurora, but also Buckingham Place, which was done through urban renewal. And then finally, at the same time, we started seeing lifestyle centers. Online shopping became very popular. And this, again, increased exponentially during the pandemic. However, it's not just online shopping that's changed. There is still a lot of times a brick and mortar presence. Think the Apple stores, Home Depot. You can go on your app, order what you need, go to the store and pick it up. Online grocery shopping, the same. So it's not all or nothing. Staff in their research, and let me say, they have done a tremendous amount of research, both meeting with each of the individual ward council members. So thank you all for your time. But going to all the shopping centers in each ward to learn what are their conditions, what makes one successful, what is an indicator that there is trouble ahead or trouble existing today. And the first is looking at the sales tax per building, square foot of building area. A healthy number is 300 per square foot. Anything below that indicates there might start to be trouble. Occupancy rate is another indicator, and you'll see, and as you can imagine, many of these work together, that if you have lower occupancy, you're going to have lower sales tax. But a healthy occupancy rate is 90%, 95% is great. Anything below that, we are starting to see trouble and we may need some intervention. Retail mix, this think your doctor's office, your dentist, even a gym, service businesses that are important and they also need a location. But when we get to a point where the majority in a center are these services businesses, or even we've seen churches start to go into strip centers, that's an indicator that the area is not as healthy as we would like. Tenant Tenant mix is also important, and these are different tenant mixes. We want the complementary mixes. So you may have a clothing store and a shoe store, or entertainment, a movie theater with restaurants that complement each other and keep our consumers in a center longer, shopping more, spending more money, hopefully. The center appearance. I'm sure as you drive through Aurora, you can see the ones where there's good management, there's been good investment and upkeep. That's often related to the sales in that center that allows the management to keep it up. But things like, is it well lit? Is the center visible from the street? What's the signage? Is it professional, or is it banners attached to the building or taped to windows? And then the landscaping, what's the condition of the landscaping? And I want to commend Councilmember Lawson. She has been very proactive in calling our attention. Councilmember Hancock as well, when there are troubles and we're able to intervene. And then finally, the presence of an anchor tenant is very important where we have the big boxes. And as we've seen over the past few years, at least the 3 and I've been here, we've been losing a few. Some of those are due to national stores closing, such as Big Lots, but definitely something to watch. Staff also in their travels and studies determined that we have 4 classifications of retail centers within Aurora. Primary centers are those that have a strong anchor tenant, they're in good condition, they have a low vacancy rate, that good retail mix, which leads to high sales per square foot, thus high sales tax per square foot, and they have a modern, clean appearance. They draw people in. The shadow areas are typically located near these primary centers or near a big box anchor. Think you may have a standalone Home Depot and nearby there may be a small strip center. So no major anchor, but they have that proximity. They do have smaller nationally recognized tenants as well as some local businesses. Next are micro centers. These are similar to shadow areas, but without the proximity to big box or a primary center. They have niche locations with retail targeted to surrounding community. One example that came to mind for me, which unfortunately we lost, was that Walmart on Colfax. And then finally, secondary centers. These have no strong anchor or retail mix. There is low consumer traffic. There may be high parcelization. So instead of one owner and manager for the whole area, pads are owned by different owners and operators, and you get different maintenance and appearance. These may also be struggling primary or other centers, and these are ones that we really want to keep a close eye on. And in the strategy, we're hoping to make some recommendations of ones that can be revitalized and ones that may need redevelopment. Again, staff has done tremendous work, and they have categorized the challenges we see facing various retail centers. First, and this is a national problem, is homelessness, crime, and economic factors. The city has some role to play with homelessness and crime prevention. We cannot, unfortunately, control the economic factors. Operational, this can include poor management, which leads to poorly maintained parking lots, buildings, landscaping. There could be a lack of appropriate lighting or signage, poor visibility, deteriorating landscape. In these areas of challenges, when you see to the areas of strategies, it's a combination of the property manager, owner, the city can come in with code enforcement, but then the hope is we come in with code enforcement, and rather than collecting the fines, can we offer some incentives to say, if you all do this, maybe the city has a role to help. And the tenants may also come together and decide they want to chip in. We've seen that with lighting at times, getting or replacing lighting. And then a third category is low consumer traffic. There's usually no strong tenant mix, poor marketing, and extensive intervention is often required. We often see this third category and a lot of the second category in those secondary centers. So general retail strategies, these are the areas we've identified for strategies. What staff is doing now is coming up with specific implementation tools, a way to rank those tools so that we can come back to you in the near future and find out what the city priorities are. As I mentioned, we have a strong but mighty retail team that has expanded thanks to council intervention, but we can't do everything. First and foremost, we need to address crime. It is expected from retailers that there's 2% attrition through retail theft. When it gets to 4%, that's a red flag. Some of the retailers we've lost in the city have seen as high as 7%. Of course, APD has a role in this, as does security, private security. And this is where business improvement districts can also help, because they can help through coalescing together to help get that private security. Another area we need to think of is attracting high volume retail and restaurants. This is why we go to ICSC, and we look forward to it every year, talking to the developers, talking to retailers, and telling them why Aurora is such a great place to live, work, and play. We may be able to offer assistance to owners and managers to fill vacant spaces. That's everything from those large tenants to our small businesses. I like to think of our retail team almost as matchmakers. They have access to data of what's available. They know the brokers out there and can help them. Again, we have the SBDC and our own small business counselors that offer counseling, training, and we have offered incentives such as that restaurant program. What we also do and want to keep doing and get better at is encouraging existing operators to expand elsewhere in Aurora, or if they outgrow their space, to find that larger space within the city. One restaurant or brew pub we lost was Liberty Justice Brewing. Sadly, they moved out of Colfax into Denver, I believe. We have the opportunity to work with property owners to tailor retail to the surrounding customer base. Ashbina Patel, our new SBDC executive director, had the opportunity to travel Colfax, Peoria, and Havana with Trevor Vaughn, who you all know, our business license manager. One, to see through things through his eyes, but also to look at some opportunities. And in particular, there was one convenience store that currently they mostly sell malted beverages, beer, liquor, and tobacco products. But right behind it, over 100 townhomes being constructed. Those are new consumers for that area. And if we could get a small corner grocer or something that will serve those new residents and existing residents' needs, it's a very exciting opportunity that, one, gives residents what they need, but also helps prevent gentrification because we're serving existing residents. The mayor, Councilmember Murillo have been great advocates, Councilmember Gardner, with how do we get more mixed income along the Colfax corridor. Maybe those are mixed use with retail that, again, serves that customer base, especially when it's walkable. It's that old Main Street. We get people walking to serve their needs. And then last but not least, we hope to come forward with some targeted recommendations for redevelopment. This could indeed be urban renewal, and Councilmember Lawson, you've been advocating for one area in your ward. While it's challenging when there's multiple owners, we need to at least start those conversations with those owners and get them to see the benefits of what could be. So now the exciting part, and I know the specific ward council members are looking forward to this. What I'm about to show you for each ward is just a snapshot, some data on your wards, and then the challenges, opportunities, and preliminary recommended strategies. So Ward 1, 14.6 million in annual sales tax revenue with 3 million square feet. There's a 3% vacancy. And while you may say, wow, Janine said that 90% or above occupancy is great, we're doing well. Unfortunately, the vacancy rates, this is over the entire ward. There are some centers that have very high vacancy rates that if we can tackle that, we'll serve the residents and we'll get more sales tax revenue. Median household income in this ward is the lowest of the city at $52,000. So again, that need to look at the corridor and maybe get some mixed income that helps support the consumer base to support retail. So challenges, as you can imagine, low spending per capita, and there's no strong anchors in this area, which leads to low consumer traffic. You know, again, if we can get a grocer in here, we would be doing great. Opportunities, there is a lot of development and redevelopment initiatives in place, the retail strategy, we've used the restaurant program. Another opportunity is there's great walkability in here. You have a captive consumer base that we need to service. And then we already have the Main Street that has started to redevelop that arts district with the theaters, Bon and Butter, now with Yan Yan next door. So there is already something started there, and we need to capitalize and leverage that and keep the momentum going. Strategies, we need to address crime. I got to see firsthand just the small steps that can be taken that lead to making crime less palatable, and it's CPTED, or crime prevention, through environmental design, taking down brick walls, making things more visible. Trevor was great in pointing out several areas where this has been done and has had a positive impact. Incentives, we need to look at those to refurbish existing centers, working with those property owners and managers. Small business assistance is crucial and has already had success, and we want to continue that success. And then look at redevelopment of underperforming retail, not only centers, but areas. There were a few corners, at least 2 corners, which if we could get, they were vacant or semi-vacant. If we could get some redevelopment and build on the energy that has started, we can really help Ward 1 and make it even better. It's great already. So moving on to Ward 2. This is, as you know, a largely developing ward, but still already has 21.6 million in annual sales tax revenue, with only 1.3 million of rentable area, sorry. And a vacancy rate of only 1.5%. It's got a relatively high medium household income of $89,000. The challenge, of course, is this area is developing, but the opportunity is it is developing very rapidly. We have projected anticipated demand. We need to find those strategic locations. I should mention a challenge and an opportunity we have in this ward is we have master plans that promise the moon and the sun with retail and commercial, and times have changed. The last thing we want to do is force developers, if they could even get the financing, to build this commercial space and have it dark. That dark retail space leads to deterioration. So we've been working with developers to have them show us what's feasible, not just today, but looking at the forecasted population. We need to be forward thinking and make sure we are reserving. But that is an opportunity, and the city is doing, I think, a very good job of saying where it's important. Think near the Gaylord, another opportunity, building on that entertainment district and taking that down the street, making sure that we have the nearby either additional retail, entertainment uses, so that we get that synergy, that high consumer traffic volume. And then we have the ability here with the transportation corridors to capture shoppers from outside the area. Strategies for Ward 2 is, again, looking at the demographic and retail demand and capture studies, working with the developers so that we're right sizing and putting retail in the appropriate locations. Incentives for anchor tenants. It's risky going into new areas like this. So we want to help attract them so that they locate here versus looking at the Green Valley Ranch area of Denver and going there first. Because if we get them first, we're getting that outside traffic as well as serving the residents of Ward 2. And then that coordination with property owners and managers to attract tenants, whether that's just our boots on the ground or our work at ICSC. I'm going to pause slightly, let you absorb. I know this is a lot of information, and if you can't tell, I get really excited about these topics. Ward 3, doing great with 37 million in annual sales tax revenue, over 5.2 million square foot of rentable building area, a high vacancy rate here, so 4.6%, something we are looking to address and are working on. Just to be clear, we are not waiting for the adoption of the retail strategy. We are already boots on the ground doing work. And then medium household income, very respectable at almost 61,000. Our challenges, and you'll see some of these challenges are also opportunities. I tend to be an optimist, but we have to be realistic. So the largely undeveloped city center, that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because that is the heart of Ward 3. Ward 3 is bisected by I-225, but that's also an opportunity to attract people from throughout the city and hopefully regionally to shop in this ward. And then another challenge is the low-performing town center mall. But that's also an opportunity as we work with the property owner to redevelop part of the site, getting more residential in that gives you more consumer base and hopefully will help turn things around. Opportunities, I've mentioned the first two. Another is one of the highest, if not the highest population density in the center, in the city. So that captive consumers right there. And then the very successful Havana Business Improvement District. So strategies is that continued coordination with property owner and managers to retain what we have for retail and attract new retailers and restaurants. Again, incentives could play a role in Ward 3, addressing crime and homelessness to make sure we keep the area attractive for shoppers. I've mentioned the coordination with property owners and then the redevelopment of the town center. 3 more to go. Thank you for hanging in with me. Ward 4, 38 million in annual sales tax revenue, over 5.2 million square feet of rentable building area with a vacancy rate of 2.9%. And again, a healthy medium household income of almost 68,000. Challenges, car dependency in this area. People need to get in their car to serve their needs. We want to make sure they can do that within the ward. So challenge and opportunity. And then we've seen a number of areas where those service businesses are replacing retail. We want to make sure we're maintaining a healthy mix. While we need the service industries, we want to encourage more of the tax producing retail and restaurants. Opportunities, this ward has the highest population density. So again, that captive consumers, and there's a large diverse mix of centers and businesses, and we want to leverage that and grow off of that. Our strategies are working with centers and retailers to attract the high volume retailers and restaurants. We may incentives, you may notice a trend here to refurbish older buildings and areas. We want to continue to offer assistance to owners and operators to fill vacant space with both traditional and non-traditional uses. Some of those non-traditional uses have been gyms and the like, and while they may not produce a lot of sales tax, They help bring consumers in. So if you have that gym and you have the athletic store next to it, or if you're like me, I go to the gym and I think I've earned that cup of coffee and a Danish, so you can have a restaurant nearby. And then the small businesses incentives will be crucial here. Ward 5, tax generation of 24.7 million, over 3.9 million of square feet of rentable building space, retail vacancy of 3%, and a medium household income of 81,000. And I apologize, I should have mentioned that this data is from the time last year when we met with each of the council members. In the final report, we will give the most current data. And then as we do regular updates to PED and council as a whole, we'll be using some of these as our indicators of success. So challenges in Ward 5 are older strip centers and micro centers that lack strong anchors. And some of these we probably need to look at and start the conversation again of redevelopment. That's one of the strategies. There's aging and outdated centers that are underperforming, and we are already being very proactive where we're seeing that they're not being kept up, of working with the managers to get those up to speed. Because if they can at least maintain them and keep them looking good, we've got a better opportunity of attracting tenants, quality tenants. And then some centers have challenges such as access and visibility. So how do we help with signage and the like? Opportunities here are some thriving power centers that are attracting customers from outside the city. Cornerstar is the prime example that when we looked at the data and people going home, that is an easy stop for them to go in and do their shopping. So great success there. And this ward has very high home ownership rate, which indicates stability of the population. And that's also helpful for creating a strong consumer base. Strategies, again, working with the centers to attract high volume retailers and restaurants. And one of our challenges is we are often hearing after the fact, Kohl's announces that they're closing stores and we have one of them. So our hope is to continue those good relationships with the property managers, both with staff and you, our council members, so that they're comfortable to call us to say, hey, this anchor is going out, making them aware that we have the retail incentive that we can consider if we get the right tenant. So that they are thinking of even calling us and not just taking the first retailer that comes along. It's a win-win situation. If they have a better tenant, they're getting more revenues, we're getting more sales tax revenues. We may need to consider incentives, including potential urban renewal in some areas. And then again, the SBDC and small business consulting, both for counseling, training, and helping our small businesses find vacant space within the ward. And last but not least, Ward 6, the ward of our sponsor. So 24.2 million in sales tax revenue. This is probably from earlier last year, and I'm assuming we've seen this grown. We will be checking that. 3.1 million square feet of existing retail space. Vacancy rate of 4.5, but I think we've seen that improve. And then the highest median household income in the city of almost 130,000. So challenges. Housing is costly in Ward 6. So it's also farther away from job spaces, the job space. So people are spending more money on their essentials such as housing and transportation. There are many independent buildings and business owners that contribute to lower consumer traffic volumes, but this is somewhere we can help through marketing, making sure we're getting strong retail and restaurants in that are desirable and will bring people in. And then currently, especially before we got Nordstrom Rack, people were going outside of the city to meet their needs. So We've got Nordstrom Rack, we got Bolero, I forget the name it's operating under, my apologies. But Lucky Strikes, thank you. I'm trying not to rely on my notes too much. But once we get those quality, it's a snowball effect that, you know, the hope is to get maybe a Trader Joe's in the ward or I don't, you know, some quality retailer. But when the retailers, other retailers see these national brands, that's an indicator to them that this is a good place to locate. So those are some of the opportunities. It is a great location, both to capture the residents within the ward, but from outside. Let's reverse the trend of people going outside, keep them, and attract people from the outside. Good demographics again in the area. E470 and other major transportation corridors will allow us to bring those outside shoppers in. There's large areas of undeveloped land, and this is again where ICSC, working with developers, working with retailers, can we matchmake and get some of that area developed to strong retail centers. You have the thriving power center, such as Southlands, that is attracting customers. And then high home ownership. Again, a lot of stability in this ward, so we have a lot of opportunity. Our strategies here are to continue our relationships with the center's owners and managers and the retailers to make sure we maintain the good base that has started there. We want to support the shadow areas and make sure that they have strong retailers. We want to develop a proactive approach of monitoring, and indeed this will be useful throughout the city. And then incentives for anchor tenants that have already been successful, as I've mentioned, the Nordstrom's Rack and Lucky Strikes. So that leads us to our next steps. The report has a lot of information. It's a deep dive. So what we are working on right now is structuring it and filling in some of the details. The hope is that each of the council members, especially the ward members, can take the introduction that has a lot of that background on the definitions, our citywide demographics, and take your ward section and be able to talk to your constituents when they ask what's going on, be able to accompany us to ICSC. We can use these then to talk to the centers in the area to help stabilize and grow retail. I've also asked staff to incorporate best practices. While we may be the first to develop an overall retail strategy, nationwide, towns and cities are addressing crime. What are they doing? What can we adopt? I always believe let's not reinvent the wheel, let's improve it. What are people doing, again, nationally to attract and retain retail? And maybe we find out we're the best, but we want to be able to tell you that we're doing the best job, but we need the research to back that up. We are going to, again, I mentioned this, evaluate funding options and the implementation actions for the strategies, because both from a funding point of view, as well as from a staffing, we can't do everything. So we want to identify the priorities per ward, might be priorities of which centers do we need to target for redevelopment, which just to maintain what they have, but then help you as a council determine the priorities citywide. And then developing those metrics for gauging success. We want to track what we're doing and see if it's having an impact. That way we can adjust. Again, I said one of our roles is to adapt to the changing times, and those metrics will help us to adapt. Our schedule is to come to, and this is, my hope is that we can do things a little early, but I want to make sure we get this really buttoned down and as close to perfect. So finish the report in April, come to PED in May. I'm working with staff on these dates because May is also ICSC, and I want to try to protect them so that their heads don't explode. Our hope is that we can take this forward a little earlier and be able to go to ICSC and focus on what we need to do there. I'd like to have some handouts to pull from this to present at ICSC, but then study session to present to all of council, and then approval by council by resolution, the latest in June. And after that, of course, we will continue because we are already doing many of these actions, our implementation, and have regular reports to the individual council members, maybe get on a rotation of your town hall meetings to be able to talk to your constituents, but also regular reports to PED and all of council. The most important thing that we need right now is your feedback to incorporate into the final report. So I am available for questions. And if I can't answer them, I will write them down and get back to you this week.
Well, I have one, and then I'll refer to the, and then I'll defer to the Mayor Pro Tem. Whoops. Uh-oh.
If need be, I will go back to the PowerPoint, but this way we can all see.
Oh, I gotta figure this out.
We can hear you.
Okay, one of you've touched on this, but I wonder if you could kind of make it a significant part or a relatively significant part of your presentation, and that is that we have a number of really unhealthy, retail centers. I'm trying to remember in your categories, the corner ones that are purely retail, like the one right across the street from the AMC on Chambers and Alameda as an example, where there's a high vacancy rate, it's not being maintained properly. And if we can compare that to what we did at Stable in Alameda, where that was an unhealthy shopping center, and it was beyond a strip center, so whatever your middle category is, and that was redeveloped into multifamily apartments and restaurants and different stores, mostly food oriented. But it's a very attractive space, and so but what do we need to do to assist owners in converting the retail areas that are really marginal and are simply not going to perform as purely retail centers? I think we did the same in Parker and Quincy. In that, the plan is to do this to redevelop that area into that mixed use kind of redevelopment.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think it is going to be very important in the strategy to use the metrics, the price, the sales tax generated per building square foot, the vacancy rates, all of these to maybe give you the top 5 areas that are in need of help. Because while there's varying degrees of assistance that's needed, but to focus concerted energy to have that turnaround and start chipping these off one by one. So absolutely.
Okay. See, I think Councilmember Sundberg and then Councilmember Gardner.
Lawson second.
Okay, Councilmember Lawson.
Cannot hear you, Mayor Pro Tem.
You're
muted.
Muted, okay. You're muted again.
You're still muted.
Technology. You're still muted.
I think that's the best you've ever done. Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Janine, for the presentation. I do have a question for you. I know that you guys have this report kind of together, but what I would like to ask, I have 26 centers. A lot of them are strip centers. Based on the information that you guys gave me probably last year, there could be a few more. I know that at a presentation you did at my ward meeting, you said there might be 28, but on this list I have here, I'm showing 26. In this report, some of these strip centers, which I have quite a few, are probably going to not be, they're underperforming and they're probably going to continue in that direction. Is it possible maybe in the report, and I don't know, I'm just looking at Ward 5, where maybe we could see where the actual underperforming centers are, so maybe we can think about another development plan instead of maybe looking at retail, or because some of these are, I can guarantee you the retail, it's going to go down. It's going to continue to go down and be underperforming. So I'm trying to figure out what are some other uses. So is there some way in this report that maybe you could say, what these retail centers here are kind of really underperforming. Therefore, we might need to think about something else. Maybe we need to think about a housing or something like that. Is that possible for the report? And I'm specifically talking about Ward 5. I don't know if other ward council members would like that, but in mine, I have a lot of strip centers. And I don't think that I don't care if we go to ICSC, I don't care if you go whatever, they're just going to keep continuing to go downhill. Chambers and Hampden, I've already talked to you about that. I really think we need to focus on that for my ward because that's a high level visibility center, and it's with the big lots going out of business, it's really going to be problematic, and it already is. And then with the Walgreens as well. But that's just one I would like to think about for redevelopment. But some of these other ones, I just don't think they're going to perform. And so I would like to have something like that in the report, especially for my ward. So just a question and suggestion.
Absolutely. And building on what I said in response to the mayor's question, using those health indicators to flag which ones need the most intervention. And you're right, with the way that strip centers built out in the city, with many small ones being able to get that redevelopment, to get the highest and best use. These may be conversations where there's multiple property owners, but we should not be afraid of undertaking that hard work and having those hard conversations. So yes. And I do want to mention and apologize. I did not realize we had the Havana bid. It's actually in Ward 4, not Ward 3, showing we're all human and imperfect. So my apologies for that.
Jeanine, I just want to say that I enjoyed working with you during the, no, I was just kidding. Okay, Councilmember Gardner, and then Councilmember Hancock.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question and then kind of a comment / suggestion. So, Jeanine, when you gave the sales tax generated by ward on each of those ward slides, is that purely retail sales tax or is that all sales tax generated in that ward?
I believe that is all sales tax, but I will get that verified.
Yeah, well, I suspect that it is, and that kind of leads me into my comment / suggestion because, not being a ward council member, I guess this is my opportunity to provide feedback. But, I think a couple things, and to go along with what Mayor Kaufman and Councilmember Lawson said, we developed in this city rooftops and strip malls, and this goes back to our very first presentation of the day, where we essentially have a structural budget deficit. And the hard part is because we developed with rooftops and strip malls, whenever there's an economic downturn, we end up cutting. And it leads us to the conversations that we were having this morning. And I think, one of the things we need to look at is how can those strip malls be redeveloped into what retail looks like today, right? I'll go back to your example of Nordstrom Rack. Nordstrom Rack is fine, I guess. I live 3 minutes from there. I will probably never step foot in there because that's not how I shop. But I think some of the things that we are attracting into there, such as Lucky Strike, the pickleball place, and there's one other, those are more an example of, where retail is headed. The other piece that I think we need to think about, and this is maybe a whole separate kind of strategy or plan, and maybe it's not necessarily specifically part of the retail plan, though it should be, from the perspective of that I think they draw off each other. Going back again to how Aurora has developed, we've developed based upon retail sales tax, and that fluctuates during economic downturn. People spend less money on things, on stuff, and that impacts us because they spend money on groceries, and we don't, of course, don't tax groceries. Going back to my question about, if it's all sales tax or just retail sales tax. I would suspect it's all sales tax in that ward. And I think Ward 2 is a good example. Ward 2 has seen significant development of primary employers and distribution centers and other types of employment, not just retail sales tax. And that's made Ward 2 very strong when it comes to the sales tax that it's generating for the city. And so as we have the conversation about what retail looks like in Aurora and redeveloping centers and things like that, I think, talking about how we can diversify how we generate sales tax in the city, it's not just by retail stores. There's a lot of different ways we can generate sales tax. And so I think we should look at Ward 2 as an example or a good test case, I guess, of how we've been successful in kind of diversifying that sales tax. Because ultimately, when you have those primary employers, that means two things. One, it means we're generating that revenue here, and those people, those are head of household jobs. But secondly, they're not leaving Aurora. They're not going to Centennial, Denver, Greenwood Village, wherever, to work during the day. And when they work during the day, they run to the store, spend money in Centennial, they eat in Centennial, all of those types of things. And so having those primary employers to diversify our sales tax keeps more of that revenue in the city.
I just love to say about, I'm concerned about the stability of Nordstrom Rack because if Councilmember Bergen ever goes to Park Meadows, I think they're just going to collapse.
Councilmember? Mayor, if I may respond
please.
to the points made. Councilmember Gardner, you're spot on that retail is one piece of an economic strategy. So our continued coordination to make sure we're bringing in primary employers. You're absolutely right. They if they're working here, they are going to shop here. So we will do what we can with the retail, but still work in the other areas of our economy as well and coordinate with our partners.
Councilmember Hancock. Who's next? Councilmember Murillo.
Thanks, Mayor. Janine, thank you for an excellent presentation. I just wanted to uplift the, comments or the connection to the feasibility study that we're undergoing. I think, as because I've been to several of the presentations, the consultants have come to my town hall to present, and there was a lot of interest. And I think this additional connection to that conversation, I think, might even be a helpful thing to include as part of that process. Like, not only is that, are we trying to address some very ward specific challenges, but there's a bigger strategy behind that suggestion. So I just wanted to uplift that and offer that as a connection point as Puma is kind of going through their town halls. I think that would be add an additional really strong layer to that presentation and those discussions.
Absolutely. This is a great conversation, and having some of these implementation items in the community development plan that will come out of that study is very important, because then we can help partner with other organizations to build on the momentum along Colfax. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think it would be helpful, for folks who are not in Ward 1, as we bring the full council, as awareness of that process, like why it's, what's the community thinking, what is their feedback, and how this, different strategies tie into, the larger bottom line for the city.
Yes.
Councilmember Bergen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to ask the question on behalf of Councilmember Sundberg, and then I'll have my comment. So he wanted to know what are the current incentives that we have? I know we have the incentive that we used for Nordstrom Rack, which was for vacant spaces that act as a catalyst to bring in other tenants. But Janine, could you talk about what we currently have in place? I know we're going to be looking at what else we need.
That is the primary one, and I do have staff compiling a spreadsheet that has every incentive across the board, not just retail. And then what incentives are outstanding, who we've given them to. So we're compiling that. Of course, we had the restaurant program, which was ARPA funding and hugely successful, not only in getting in restaurants, but the fact that we had to have a say. If the restaurant we help goes out, we have a say in refilling that space. We used to use community development block grants, my understanding, talking to my counterparts in the city here. So those CDBG funds as Main Street, which you can use to refurbish storefronts. So looking at, I know those funds are highly coveted, but it does help us turn things around. So do we think about taking some of those again? You are the policymakers. I'm just throwing things out there, but we will come back with that list.
And I think Councilmember Sundberg wanted to know specifically on refurbishing. So I know obviously you're going to be looking at that as well. For me, I know, I think this is really important. It's been a long time coming to have this retail strategy. A few years ago, I asked my fellow council colleagues to approve adding a couple FTEs over a few years to our retail team, specifically because I felt that we needed more representation of all wards. So I think this is really great that we're able to do this ward by ward and then holistically as a city. We're quite a huge city, so a lot of different needs and a lot of different demographics. It makes it very challenging. And so I want to thank the staff for all the work that has been done. I know it took a lot to go visit these different centers and so forth. I have a question on return on investment, because when we talk about refurbishing centers or offering incentives to them, I think it's really important that we look at if we do some incentive, do we get a return on investment? Is it really going to pay off, or are we putting money into a particular center that we know would never achieve the goals that we want them to achieve? So could you address that from a return on investment perspective?
100% agree. And that's where we need the metrics. Are we getting more sales tax? But understanding enough of what works, what doesn't. There are areas, you're absolutely right. And that's where ranking them and taking into the ranking will be, if it's a small area and it's hard to access, doesn't have the visibility, we may give an incentive, but we may not even get the retailer. So where do we, before we even spend any money, and it's a retail rebate, the tax rebate, but human capital. We have a great team, but they can only do so much. So we want to start with that efficiency and being able to recommend to you that this is where, based on looking at successful centers, where we think we're going to have the greatest impact.
Great. And then one last point, and this is for Councilmember Gardner that doesn't want to step foot in Nordstrom Rack. I know he has 2 daughters, and or 3 daughters, and I bet they would like to shop there. That's all.
Well, it's 2025, so we can order our clothes online.
Oh, okay. I won't touch that one.
I'm staying out of it.
Janine, anything else?
That is it. I really appreciate your time and look forward to having the team bring the final product forward and getting your recommendations on priorities.
Great job. Thank you. Appreciate it. Jason, anything else?
No, sir. That's all we had. Just had miscellaneous down in case there was anything else that council needed to bring up. Obviously, there was a number of questions and information requests, so we will consolidate all of those and get back to council with that information. But thanks for everybody's time today, and I'll stand by if there's any other questions.
Councilmember Bergen, did you have anything?
Oh, no, my hand won't go down on that thing.
Okay. Hey, does anybody have anything else? Thanks, everybody. Great job. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you all.